And welcome to this first public hearing for the Community Development Block Grant funding for the Borough of Gettysburg, held this Monday, July 24th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. I'd like to ask all in attendance to introduce themselves for the record. So, Mr. Carr, do you want to start over there? Just introduce yourself. We'll go around the room.
My name is Chad Allen Carr, council member at large.
Judy Butterfield, Ward 3.
John Lawver, Third Ward.
Matthew Moon, Ward 2.
Wesley Heyser, Ward 1.
Sarah Stahl, Assistant Borough Manager, Secretary.
Charles Gable, Borough Manager, Treasurer.
Carly Marshall, Planning Director.
Alicia Sanders, President, Ward 3.
And via telecommunication device, Patty Lawson, council member from Ward 1. So that takes us to our first item, which is the welcome and opening remarks regarding the hearings. We'll have this hearing this evening, July 24th. To receive public input, there will be an additional hearing, which will be held on August 28th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. again, for the purpose of receiving public input related to the use of Community Development Block Grant funds, which are allocated to the Borough of Gettysburg. The Borough of Gettysburg is a direct entitlement community, and as such will receive an allocation of $129,141 in fiscal year 2023 CDBG funding from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Those funds can be used to benefit a variety of activities, including water and sewer systems, streets, housing rehabilitation, emergency housing assistance, recreation and community facilities, new public services, historic preservation, removal of architectural barriers, blight removal, economic development, and administration and planning. Borough must demonstrate that approved projects, 1, benefit low to moderate income persons, and 2, remove slum or blight, or 3, meet an urgent community need. So, at this time, Carly and Charles, do either of you have comments you'd like to make, or kind of just discuss that any further?
Yeah, the president introduced my comments quite well. I was just going to announce essentially the same thing. So with this, I'll just pass it on to Planning Director Marshall, who can talk a little bit about the process, and then we can receive public comment.
Yeah, so I would just add that our most recent examples for use of CDBG funds, we use them for curb cut, ADA compliance for I think 9 or 10 years, and then we use them for a portion of the South Street improvement project, and then most recently in 2021 and 2022, CDBG funds are budgeted for the North Washington Street ADA sidewalk improvement project. So this hearing is just for the purpose of getting public comment on what the public wishes us to use CDBG funds for. And then our next hearing on August 28th, we will be coming with a proposal. We'll advertise that in advance for what we propose to use the funds for. There'll be another public comment period at that time. And then if council wishes to move forward, we'll actually submit the application through the county for this year's CDBG funds.
Okay. Are there any questions amongst the council before we proceed to public comment? Okay, is there any citizen input at this time to the use of CDBG funds? All right, seeing none, we will adjourn until August 28th, and we'll have the presentation. All right, thank you, everyone. The Borough of Gettysburg. A few announcements before we begin our business for the evening. National Night Out will be Tuesday, August 1st, 2023 at the Recreation Authority. Madam Mayor, speak a bit on National Night Out.
National Night Out is a time when the police and the community can interact together, and we're going to have a lot of fun. It's from 4:30 to 8 p.m. We're going to have a band this year. The East River Band will be performing. A lot of community groups will be having booths, so if anybody's interested in contacting me or the police chief to have a booth there, please let me know. The fire company will be selling food as a fundraiser, because the fire company used to have our carnival, and we don't have it anymore, so they're going to be part of National Night Out as a fundraiser for the fire department. The Wellspan helicopter will be there, and several other public safety, social services agencies, and businesses. And this is something I just learned today. They told me there wasn't going to be a dunk tank, because I volunteered to be in it.
Oh, my goodness.
Guess who's in the dunk tank? Charles Gable. So it'll be a lot of fun.
Is that a fundraising
I was
portion?
gonna say, that could make a lot of money.
$1 million.
Give the
Who's
money
going
to
to
some
throw out the
charitable,
first pitch? It's
charitable
not a
group doing good
fundraiser,
work for
but
the food.
yeah, it's just an effort to blend with the community. Yeah, but Charles, I can't believe you're in the dunk tank.
So just to be clear, the dunk tank is free.
Yeah. Oh, stop it. Look.
Charles Gable is in the dunk tank.
Maybe not.
Everybody's gonna be
Okay.
out there throwing
Well, I
balls
planned
at
on
you.
attending, and I will definitely attend now.
$5.
Few people
All
come
right.
to mind.
Otherwise, this evening at 6:30, we had our first hearing on the Community Development Block Grant funding for fiscal year 2023. The second hearing for that funding will occur on Monday, August 28th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. here in Council Chambers. At that time, there will be a presentation made by the staff regarding proposal for the grant funding, but also, again, an opportunity for public comment related to the use of those funds. An executive session of the Borough Council of the Borough of Gettysburg was conducted immediately following the adjournment of the July 10th, 2023 monthly business meeting of the Borough Council, consistent with Section 708A4 and Section 708A5 of the Sunshine Act. So that concludes our announcements. This evening, our first matter is we'll have Mr. Geis, Ms. Pyle, present from the Gettysburg Municipal Authority. So if you'd
Well,
like to
I'm not
introduce.
Mr. Geis, but I think most of you do know me. I'm Dorothy Puel, and I'm currently the chairperson of the Board of Trustees of the Municipal Authority. So I want to thank you for including us on your agenda this evening. And I just wanted to give you some context as to the board's thinking about how we came to the conclusion that we needed to take a look at our current rate structure. Of course, it's always a sensitive topic, and I want to assure you that our board is appreciative of the trust that council has placed on us to make informed and thoroughly vetted decisions about the authority's undertaking, with special thoughts to how they affect our ratepayers. We are committed to ensuring that GMA provides exceptional service to our customers now as well as in the future. And to that end, for quite some time now, the board has been taking advantage of training that's provided by the Pennsylvania Municipal Authorities Association. In March of actually 2022, we heard a presentation by a gentleman by the name of David Bush. He works as a consultant in many capacities for authorities around the state. And this particular time, his topic was financial responsibilities, including ways to budget and generate revenues. And it sort of coincided with some internal discussions the board had been having about the revenue losses we experienced during the COVID pandemic. So after some further discussion, we consequently brought Mr. Bush in to conduct a formal rate study, with the goal coming directly from our mission statement, which is an adequate, reliable, and cost-effective supply of water. Mark and his team worked very closely with Mr. Bush, sourcing data. They crunched a lot of numbers, and he is going to now share the findings of that rate study with you this evening. So, Mark, please take it away.
Thank you, Dorothy. Thank you, everybody, for inviting us. As Dorothy said, we employed into a rate study over a year ago. Let me see. There's our mission statement, as Dorothy mentioned. And we'll move right on to Keystone Alliance, was our consulting company who did the study. So, as Dorothy mentioned, we, along with the Keystone Alliance and our staff, we went over a lot of data. That data included reviewing and discussing all aspects of our operations, from our revenues to expenses, including expenses on the current years of inflation, chemicals, chain supply issues, things that a lot of the organizations, companies, and everybody was dealing with through the tail end of COVID into the years we have now. We also discussed our capital improvements, the age of our system, debt service, reserve fund policies that the board has set. And as Dorothy mentioned too, we also really concentrated on disparities that we were seeing in our revenues regarding our during the pandemic COVID situation, where we had a lot of businesses that were shut down for a period of time, which really shed a new light on our rate structure. So when we speak of the revenues, just a little background, the municipal authority has about $62 million of insured valuables in buildings and contents, and that's not even including the water mains and the sewer mains throughout the system. We approximately have a $6.3 million operating budget. And on the screen, I'm not going to read them, but obviously miles of water main, miles of sewer mains, 2 water treatment plants, water plant, wastewater treatment plants, pumping stations, obviously lots of facilities, lots of equipment, lots of buildings. And to repeat what I said, I'll probably say it a couple more times, but the age of our infrastructure, of our water and sewer in the town, obviously doesn't take long, but it's probably over 50% of it probably has an age of at least 7 years or older. Obviously, and a lot of that age infrastructure probably sits within the borough, just to the fact that the borough is the foundation and the kind of the beginning of the water and sewer system as we branched out from the center of town to the edges of town and even into Strabane and parts of Cumberland Township. So we also, obviously, expenses, continual regulations and mandates that are continuously coming down from EPA and DEP. Obviously, you probably hear some about it in the news regarding emerging contaminants, PFOS, PFAS, things like that. That's all things that will be on the horizon and probably setting new MCL, maximum contamination limits for our water systems, and potentially having to put in additional treatments and stuff like that for those in the coming years also. So a lot of things like that still on the horizon as we progress. Capital improvements, just mention a few. Obviously, there's a list of some up here already. A couple months ago, and spoke about capital improvements. But I think some of the highlights is a new well that we're looking to develop south of town, out on Sachs Road. We call it the Andrews Well currently. That well, when completed, will add about 400,000 gallons worth of daily water capacity to the system. Obviously, tanks, upgrades to pump stations, a new office building, a new administration office building at 424 Middle Street, and continuous replacement of water and sewer mains, and even sometimes not the lining of sewer mains as opposed to replacing them. We also collaborate with the borough, the gas company, the storm authority, in any type of way where we can work together to try to maximize everyone's effort to try to get projects done when we can in the same area and really cut costs. Sometimes it works, and sometimes obviously it doesn't. Depends on funding sources and things like that. We also have tried to encumber some grants, things like that. H2O grant, we're still waiting on our feedback on that. We applied for grant money for the Andrews Well, and we also applied for grants through the Adams County Response and Recovery Fund, but we were unsuccessful in receiving funds for that. So we'll continue to try. The other one of the things that we speak of is debt service. That's basically the debt that the authority holds Currently, our total debt is a little shy of $29 million, 16 on sewer and 12 on the water. Currently, sewer payments, principal and interest per year on the sewer side makes up $1.4 million of our operating budget. And on the water side, it's approximately $735,000 a year, principal and interest. So obviously, continue to work. The debt service that we currently have in place, we do have some of the money in place for some of the projects, but obviously we're also trying to look at our rates and trying to make sure that we can continue to pay for our operating expenses, but we can also continue to generate revenues that we can potentially put away in a capital improvement plan and reduce our needs to do bond issuances in the future if possible. So. And just recovery cost of each separate system. So just to understand that the water and sewer systems are two separate systems. So we're trying to make sure that water customers pay for water needs, sewer customers pay for sewer needs. Obviously, there's a lot of customers that have both, but there are customers within the municipal authorities system that might only have water or have potentially sewer, more just water, more of the Cumberland Township residents and things like that. Another thing, obviously, we're trying to make sure that, we want fairness for all our customer bases, and our customer bases consist of residential, commercial, public, and industrial. So we're making sure that resident and a commercial business are paying their fair share in an equal fashion. So what did the rate study conclude? First of all, I'll state by saying that GMA is presently in good financial shape, but the study did show that a rate increase for both water and sewer are needed, obviously, to ensure our continual efforts to maintain our existing system and continue to build for the future. One of the things that we look to do is create a new water structure. This new water structure will consist of a service charge and a usage charge beginning in 2024. The idea goes back to the comment we spoke of earlier, disparities through the pandemic, where we found out that our structure was kind of based off of usage. So when usage disappeared, rates disappeared. So we, through the study, determined that we need to establish a service charge which helps build and maintain what we call fixed costs. So the fixed costs throughout the year, we have variable costs also, but trying to maintain that fixed cost. And by doing that, by doing that service charge, that's where you create your fairness from your residential customers through your commercial customers. So 5/8 3/4 inch meter is a typical meter that a resident has that consists of what we'll call one unit. We'll take a 2-inch meter, it consists of 8 units. And these units are based off of AWWA ratio standards. So American Water Works Association, industry leader in providing guidance and policy and procedures for water companies and stuff like that. They created this ratio. So the idea is when you're looking at the units, residential, 1 unit, 2-inch meter, 8 units. So the person with 8 units would pay 8 times the service fees. So because their capacity is 8 times greater than the person with the residential with the 5/8 3/4 meter. So that's the idea that will help us with the fixed costs and hopefully allow us to continue to prosper. We also will with the usage fee, you basically in the future would pay for what you use. So we would do away with, currently we have a minimum allowance. So the minimum currently for like a 5/8 3/4, you get 900 cubic feet, which is just around 7,500 gallons, I'll say, per quarter. That disappears. You pay your service charge, and then you pay a usage charge based off of your usage. And I'll show you. So the next slide. Well, I must have missed a slide. Sorry. So, I'm sorry, so the proposed rates, here's a little chart that just shows the proposed rates. So on the left shows the current rate structure. So I'm just using a 5/8 3/4 inch meter, and it's within the borough. So currently, if someone had no usage, they would pay $44.03 for a total. If someone used 900 cubic feet, they would also pay $44.03. And someone that used 1,300 cubic feet per quarter, which is 9,742 gallons, would pay approximately $62.51 a quarter. When you look at the new rates on the side, the new proposed rate structure, no usage would be $22.44. 900 would be the $22.44 plus the usage charge of $4.62 per 100 cubic feet. So that would go to $64.02. And the 1,300 cubic feet would have the $22.44 usage charge and a $60 service charge and a $60 usage charge for a total of $82.50. So you see that both of those structures right there would see a $20 increase per quarter in their water rates. So to conclude, we're looking to implement the proposed water rate increase in January of 2024. We would also follow in 2026 with the same concept on the sewer, where we would switch the sewer over to a service-based and usage-based system also. And hopefully that will, we feel confident that that will lead us into the future and continue to let us maintain and try to build the system and keep it going into the future. So, questions?
How would a usage-based model work for sewage?
Sewage-based model, so you're still basically looking at your water usage, but you would have a service charge. So you would do the same thing for every 100 cubic feet. You would pay a certain fee based off those 100 cubic feet.
Got it, thank you.
So, yes, John?
How does that work where they don't have water, but they have sewer?
Flat rate, would still have to be a flat rates charge.
Okay.
Mark, if there are 8 units, does that mean separate units? Like if there's a property that has 8 units, does all the water has to be separate?
No, it doesn't have to be separate, but from a billing standpoint, it is recognized. So an apartment complex with 8 units is 8 residential units compared to 1 residential unit over here. So the fair share portion is person in the single-family dwellings paying the $22.44 service charge, and the person with the 8 units is paying $22.44 times 8 for each one of those units, or meter size. So it's based off of meter size or units.
It's
So-
not necessarily reflective of how many residences. It's reflective of a calculation, kind of like in stormwater, we use equivalent residential units.
So in our situation, it can be based off of EDUs, but there are places in the borough who I'll just say have 10 apartments. They have a 1-inch meter, say. A 1-inch meter has a ratio of 2.5 or 3, but we know there's 10 units within that property. Their fair share is to pay 10 units on the service charge, and then their usage is based off their usage. So now that's fair to the person, the single-family dwelling, as opposed to that. So if you have a meter and it's large enough and the meter is covering your EDUs, then yes, you are, that statement would be correct. But if you're undersized on your meter size, we then have to take a look at your actual living units in that facility and bill off of that.
But in like a commercial industrial type circumstance, it's based upon the meter size essentially.
Strictly off the meter size.
That's
correct.
really what I was referring
Yeah,
to.
I'm sorry, yes.
No, you're fine.
No.
You're fine. Okay. The other questions for Mr. Geis or Ms. Pule?
I mean, it'll be something new to us, staff, so we're looking in, like I said, implementing it in January, so we'll have a lot of hurdles to still overcome regarding billing, trying to bring our billing together and all that stuff, but looking forward to serving everybody and continue to try to do our best to provide high-quality water and sewer for the folks of Gettysburg and the surrounding area, so.
And from a public input perspective, really the appropriate venue is the municipal authorities meetings. We appoint members to the municipal authority, but the municipal authority makes these decisions and governs themselves.
Thank you.
All right, that takes us to public comment. The items on the agenda this evening include the presentation there by Mr. Geis and also our employee policy manual. So this first public comment session, I'd ask you to restrict yourself to those items, use the podium, give your name and address. Is there public comment at this time? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the employee policy manual. The first chapter we have is Chapter 10, which is up for final review. This is the chapter on benefits.
Do we want to go over this is about the third time, I think, that the council reviewed this chapter. You'll see there's notes in there from Labor Attorney Love on page 3 of 6.
Yeah, I'd say that given we're in the final review phase of this chapter, I'd ask if there are items that appear that you would make it known that you'd like to discuss them. Point 1 deals with all the insurance benefits, which is quite extensive, and the modification that Charles is referring to is on page 3. 10.1.7, this deals with workers' compensation insurance, and a lot of this is language reflecting the crafting and adoption of the Heart and Lung Act, which would affect police officers employed here by the borough in certain circumstances, and the reporting of those injuries if they were to occur. Any issues or items with 10.1 insurance? All right, yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. You said that there was public comment, but just on those two topics, so if I have a different topic,
The second public comment session, yeah.
there is one?
Yes, we always have a second one, yes.
Thanks a
No
lot.
problem. Absolutely. 10.2 takes us to retirement. There is a modification there to the language related to the pension plan.
There was an edit here by Assistant Manager Stahl as it relates to how retirements are calculated if you were employed less than the 10 years vesting but still achieve traditional retirement age. And you'll see that's highlighted there.
Yeah, that was the item that I noticed. All right, of course, we have our non-uniform and our uniform pension plans. Questions on 10.2? Not. 10.3 is our education benefits portion. And 10.4 deals with part-time employees and police cadets, which are not eligible for benefits unless authorized by the CBA and other agreement or policy. All right. At the end of that chapter, we have some items that I would agree with the notes that they probably should be moved, dealing with attendance, job abandonment, hours of work.
Yeah.
I guess before we direct those to be moved, are there any issues that anyone has with the attendance policy, job abandonment clause, or the hours of work clause? Which most of it are governed by the collective bargaining agreements. Really, it just refers to the administrative staff for the most part.
We can
All
make
right.
that a standalone chapter.
Seeing none, yeah, I think that that's probably appropriate. I have not seen another chapter where that would logically fit in. All right, so any items with chapter 10 that we need to revisit? All right, seeing none, we have chapter 14, personal appearance.
So we discussed this at the previous
Last work session,
last
right?
workshop, and we decided to table this. We wanted to have this discussion with both of you gentlemen present. We felt that this required everybody's full input. The question had to do with, we got up to 14.1.5, and the question had to do with whether we want to establish or continue to ascribe to a policy that affects people's choice in piercings or tattoos or unnatural hair color. And so the question posed by staff was, had to do with, the idea, the concept that we wish to have our staff portray a professional demeanor. I had put in that I have trouble being completely objective on this, as I am a person who chooses to wear a nose ring, but I take it out in professional situations. That's a choice I make. I don't know that it's necessarily a policy with my employer. I will say that we don't have a ton of, openly public-facing staff. Most of our business is done in closed offices. And I would wager that the taxpayer would be more concerned with is that when they call, their concern is met in a professional and thorough manner. I don't think they really care whether the person has a nose ring or hair color that's unnatural. But again, we wanted both Mr. Heyser and Mr. Lawver's input on this policy change, if there were one.
All right, discussion. 14.1.5.
I would agree with Mr. Moon there on his comments. I also agree with what I'm seeing struck out.
Yeah, essentially those items were
I
marked
agree
as
with that.
stricken.
Mhm.
Yep.
I would caution the words on tattoos. I would caution the words visible tattoos that are offensive. Well, what's offensive to you might not be offensive to me. I would caution on that, but again, if legal counsel has gone through this and they're suggesting that that word is correct, I'm gonna lean to my colleagues on what do you think?
It does ask for somebody's opinion to be
Right. It's subjective.
to be made. I think if that were altered to say visible tattoos that contain profanity, weapons, nudity, or promote drug or alcohol use, that would cover. I mean, rather than give examples of what would be considered, what could be considered objectionable in a professional work environment, I think we could just state it like that.
Yeah, I mean, the only other alternative is you just don't permit them. That's pretty much the decision you have. I sympathize or empathize with the idea of putting someone in a position where they have to make that determination. The person who's going to be asked to make that determination, that's part of why they make what they make. I do think that it might be useful just to, you could go either way with the language that are offensive, such as, but to me the list is pretty direct. I worked with someone in a professional setting many years ago that boys wore long sleeves even when it was hot as blazes out, and I didn't know why until we were out socially at the end of the school year, and I said, oh, that's sleeve tattoos. Okay. None of them were offensive, but that's just professional demeanor. Now that's years ago, and I'm a lot more conservative than most, I think, in regards to these things. I've worked for employers that were private employers that would never permit any of this.
Sure.
And quite a number of other things. But I'm also sensitive that it's a public employer, it's a public agency. My opinions don't necessarily reflect the opinions of the whole. I mean, when I was in high school, people wore hair that was of unusual color, and if anything, it would just look jealousy because I don't have much left.
So yeah, I think just the wording there, I agree with Mr. Moon that perhaps it could be changed to something to the effect of visible tattoos such as XYZ must be covered during business hours. But putting into it the verbiage of that are offensive, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, my primary concern in this chapter was that you get someone who is dressed in a manner that is appropriate for the position.
Sure.
So that, you know, the road crew comes in the morning, they're wearing work clothes, but they're clean. Okay? And someone's in the office, they're wearing something that's appropriate to be in an office. Because that's what I see that really, to me, undermines the notion of professionalism. People get a little too casual about how they dress, and they get too casual in just about everything, and I see that in my own workplace.
Yeah. Is this language similar to both contracts?
No, there's not a lot that references this in the contracts because both of those units require work uniforms. So appearance is dictated by the policies of those departments that require uniforms. But the contract is silent as it relates to facial jewelry, tattoos, neck, face, hands, and hair color.
And the police also have their own policies of personal appearance standards. Same with tattoos, they do have a section under personal appearance for offensive tattoos, and then they have examples of them. So that language is correct. But they kind of follow the same thing. They have their own policy beyond what we have right here in the employee handbook that they follow through Lexipol.
But in their policy, if they have an offensive tattoo, must it be covered while they're in uniform, or?
Let me see.
Or police.
It says while on duty or representing the Gettysburg Police Department in any official capacity, members should make every reasonable effort to conceal tattoos or other body art. And it goes on.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I know that, and we're not talking about the police contract, but I know there are police departments where if you have tattoos on your arms, you have to wear a long sleeve shirt year round. They have to be covered.
Oh, I can remember when someone that worked for a fire department got one that was like right at the edge. We were like, you've made a mistake. And if you were like 1 or 2 inches up your arm, this wouldn't be a problem, but you're really asking for it with your employer.
Yeah.
Not that, you know, it's whether I agree or not, but it's just the way it is. Their policy was. I guess the only thing that I would say regarding I think about it more with that are offensive, such as, that's probably something that should be left, because otherwise you're going to try to draft some sort of all-inclusive list. So as I sit here and about the things that sometimes people put on themselves, if you had someone that, say, had, you know, a swastika or the Thunderbolts, you know, or something like that, like, you don't want to necessarily say, well, you don't want somebody pointing to it and saying, well, it's not on the list. I think anyone could agree, reasonable person. If we lost that lawsuit, I'd back the manager that told that person to cover them up. I feel comfortable saying, well, if the court said we couldn't, that's fine, but I agree with the call that makes me question a lot of things about the person, of course, but.
Well, in that case, you shouldn't list anything. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
then you may reword it to visible tattoos that may be considered offensive must be covered during business hours. And
I think you
may
can,
be
yeah.
considered offensive is the borough manager makes that decision.
My opinion, you could still list things. It's just you want to, if you remove those few words, it makes like this is it, you know.
Right, but if you
And we're
list,
not-
if you list few things and you don't list one thing, then
There again, you would hope that employees that are hired would have good common sense, but common sense doesn't seem to exist anymore, so.
I think if you generalize it, then it's better. If you start listing things, then someone can point to it, well, it wasn't on the list.
And
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing. You could phrase something that, you know, promotes or engages with activities that would not be permitted during the work hours. So
Or-
a lot of the things that are listed there.
Or conclude it perhaps with per your supervisor's discretion, or
Yeah, like those are, a lot of the things that are listed are behaviors you wouldn't allow, right? You wouldn't allow someone to be profane with a member of the public. So you wouldn't allow them to have profanity on their, you know, whatever. That's kind of what I'm looking at. You wouldn't allow them to be nude with the public or consume drugs or alcohol with the public during work hours. Well, drugs in any case, but alcohol during work hours. Okay.
kind of a fine line, doesn't matter which way you walk it.
Doesn't matter how you do it, you're going to be wrong at some point with someone.
Are we done with that one?
So where did we
Be
land?
okay to leave it as is if this is
Okay.
kind of the list that Gretchen and
Okay.
so forth had vetted? Is that all right? I mean, it's
So strike what's.
either that or we have to create new language. That's
I
kinda
still
where we're at.
think that are offensive is incorrect. That
Okay.
may be considered offensive, such as ... might be better suited, but again,
Yeah,
I'm
current
not legal
times,
counsel, I'm
yeah.
just giving my opinion
A lot of things can be
of
considered
the standard
offensive.
operating procedure and manual. If we're done with that one, the next one that I do have a problem with is exceptionally form-fitting or revealing blouses, sweaters, shirts, skirts, dresses, or pants. I read that frankly as body shaming, and
Well, it does seem.
why
to-
are you putting sexual, into a manual? No. I just don't, that's entirely worded wrong. Exceptionally form-fitting, how dare you tell me that my clothes are form-fitting? Maybe I have of a certain body that this is the best that I could afford and this is the best that I could buy. I'm sorry that it's form-fitting and offensive to you.
I don't think that was the intention of it.
I'm
My
sure it
inten-
wasn't. I'm
The
just saying.
intention is more of like, a short bodycon, like clubbing kind of dress. I mean,
And I think I know what the intent was, I'm just saying how it can be perceived.
Well, and we go through these. I know that the school district where I work has gone through great pains recently with dress codes, and it's very difficult because a lot of these documents were written, like I think that bullet point is written generally with one sex in mind. And
Right.
it's just when it was written. In the era when it was written, probably that was how such things were drafted. I don't necessarily have a problem with that being stricken. What do other people think?
I'm fine with that. You can strike that.
I mean, it seems like it's putting yourself into a sex or gender discrimination type scenario, and it just doesn't seem like a wise place to be anymore. I'm sure there was a time when it seemed more appropriate. All right, are there any other items there?
No.
Yeah, gym clothes and flip-flops and so forth. All right, so are there any other items in chapter 14 then? Personal appearance. All right, are you good with where we're at there? Okay. So that would take us to, leave chapter 17, which is
quite catch that.
parking.
Can you please repeat?
That would take us, I believe, to chapter 17.
No, it's your computer.
Somewhere, Siri or one of the other, I don't even know what they're all called. Corporate America is listening. All right. So again, this is we're still in final review chapters here. Chapter 17 really this is the parking for the employees.
Right.
And deals with parking here on the property or on High Street and how that operates. There were a few modifications here dealing with, not parking, for instance, where the inside the Sally Port where the police vehicles belong, right? And that's something that's kind of been discussed in the context of making sure that our police vehicles can get where they need to go. So are there any questions or comments about Chapter 17? This is the final look at that.
Nope.
All right, that takes us then to Chapter 19. Chapter 19 deals with political activity. I had marked on my notes for the last work session, I was absent, that this is one chapter that a lot of it probably originates out of civil service law and Hatch Act issues, and as such with the civil service regulation, a lot of it targets police officers. There are actually certain statutes in the Commonwealth that prohibit police officers from being present at voting places due to historic intimidation practices and so forth, which is an interesting way that you end up with constables at polling places. But I would think that this should apply to all borough employees. When we're talking about engaging in political activity or participating in conduct of political or election campaign nature while on duty or in the uniform of the borough, to me, anybody that's wearing a borough uniform or they're using the borough logos or symbols, pins, polos, that kind of stuff, we should not have any of our employees. So where it says police officers are prohibited in participating in political activity, I would strike police officers and just make that employees. It occurs in the title, it occurs right below that. And a lot of it, again, is just written based upon how the laws are written. So, for instance, it calls out police officers being prohibited from holding elected office, but we also know that elected officials are prohibited from being employed, which is later noted. So I think it should just say, employees are prohibited from holding elected office.
Yeah, and I think that's fairly consistent with other governments as well. I know at the county level, county employees can't even put out a yard sign out during, that might affect their employment. I would like to see this language go further, though, as stated in the notes there, that police should not appear in their Gettysburg uniforms, with a Gettysburg vehicle, with a Gettysburg badge, or certainly not a borough-issued weapon at a political event that's not work-related.
Yeah, right, unless we're providing some sort of service.
Yep.
That we would for any special event.
Yep.
Do we have language for that? I don't know that. I thought there was.
Wouldn't that be covered under 19.3?
That's what I'm looking at. I thought we did have some new language that reflected that.
It might be covered by 19.3, but because it says from taking an active part in political management or in political campaign, that can be subjective. Well, I'm not taking an active part, I'm just there. I just showed up. Off,
Yeah, I think
off duty.
I think the closest it gets is 19.3.12, addressing a convention, caucus, rally, or similar gathering of a political party in support or opposition to a partisan candidate for public office or political party office. I think it would be worth adding an item that they're prohibited from attending. How to phrase that?
Yeah, I mean, addressing is very specific.
Trying to look for similar language that we already have.
I would say addressing or attending a convention, caucus, et cetera, and at the end, add language that indicates that if they're representing themselves at all as an employee of the Borough of Gettysburg, that would be a violation of the policy.
Yeah, I think where I'm headed was attending when in uniform, unless attendance is required as a job function. Because we will certainly have times when it is required due
Sure.
to the nature of these things, but we don't want the employee using the borough's essentially the appearance of appearing in a uniform kind of grants a de facto assumption of borough endorsement, and you don't want to have that. So I would say that item 12 there could be modified to include attendance and then just qualify that it's when in uniform or representing themselves as an employee of the borough unless engaged in engaged in a
Would it make
work activity.
more sense to just create a new
Just
section?
add another one.
A new section, like 19.3.1, to something to the effect of employees prohibited from attending any function in uniform unless
Well, that's
they're,
true.
they're providing a service.
You may actually even want to put it up in 19.2 because 19.3 only concerns civil service employees.
Right.
And so what they did was they took and copied and pasted language out of a law, and that's where all these items came from. So would be better to go up and make 19.2.
19.2.1, something like that.
Yeah, somewhere in there that
It's a very
employees-
narrow defined area where someone could attend a function, but only in the official duties of their position.
Yeah.
So like if an officer is providing security, for example, you're going to want them in uniform.
So actually, yeah, the language there at 19.2, if we just made it number 3 under it, already carves it out. It says employees are prohibited from engaging or participating in the conduct of any political or election campaign while on duty or in uniform or while using borough property other than to, well, that says other than exercise their own right to vote. So we need to make sure there's a carve out for if they're, need to be there for the purpose of literally collecting the garbage or, you know, protecting the public. That's literally what it comes down to. Those are the two occasions when it's going to happen.
Right. I'll work on that.
All right, so we get some language to that effect and maybe hit this one again.
Mhm.
All right, is that okay with everyone? Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Just don't want the staff engaging in political activity while they're in the borough. Light. All right, 22, chapter 22, workplace violence. This is a final review chapter. I saw the addition there at the beginning, right? If there's immediate danger, you call 911. It's a good addition. All right, so 22.2 deals with the general policy, reporting structure. You have language in there from the employee complaint policy. So that's all language that we have seen before. That is a significant portion of what has been added. Most of what has been added. So any questions or concerns with Chapter 22, Workplace Violence Prevention?
No.
All right, if there are not, we will then move on to Chapter 23. Which is our drug and alcohol policy. I think this is one where I noticed that it appears there's a lot of new language, but some of the similar language have been stricken, if I recall correctly. Maybe I don't recall. Yeah, I do. Okay. All right, so this is a pretty lengthy chapter. Deals with drugs and alcohol use and abuse. 23.1 is your statement of general policy. 23.2 deals with scope and application. I think I had a note here. 23.2. It would seem to me that it should say this policy applies to all employees.
Yeah.
Rather than all police officers employed, whether full-time or part-time.
Employees of the borough.
Yeah, all employees of the borough.
And then take employed by and change that to of.
Yeah, so that portion there, just strike that. Employed by and just employees of the borough. Are there other questions or concerns in 23.1 or 23.2? 23.3 deals with key definitions. Everything from the concept of an EAP to medical review officer, what constitutes a negative or positive result, substance abuse professionals, workplace. 23.4, we start getting into roles and responsibilities, and that's why this is so lengthy, because each party in the borough staff, whether it be the manager, the department head, the chief of police, HR, everyone has very specific, as do the employees themselves, very specific and called out responsibilities. So 23.4 deals with those responsibilities. Are there any questions in there? 23.5 deals essentially with the standards related to drugs and alcohol, possessing on property, not using, what it means to be using alcohol. The 0.04, that's the CDL level that's used. That's how that's reached. 23.5 also deals with medications, call-in situations. So if an employee is asked to come into the borough and has been partaking in alcohol, that they do not do that. Any questions on 23.5? Okay, 23.6 gets into the testing that is required. You have pre-employment, you have random and reasonable suspicion. There is some deviation, and I believe it's covered in here, based upon whether someone is CDL driver or not. I'm not sure if that's in this section or later on in this part, but there are very specific criteria with PennDOT and that don't necessarily apply to everyone. Any questions in 23.6? That goes down through post-accident testing, returning to duty, follow-ups, and refusal, which is treated as a positive.
Would it be easier to just put a statement in here that says that our employees that are CDL drivers have to meet CDL regulations instead of trying to copy them over? And
There is a section for CDL drivers and for police officers because they both, CDL has to follow the the Department of Transportation guidelines. And then, of course, the police officers have to follow their own guidelines as well. So there are sections later on in here for those two specifically.
I think what John's trying to say is like 23.7 deals with CDL, 7.1 deals with CDLs. I think his sentiment is that should this be in there, or should it just say that you follow the regulations for CDL drivers in case, for instance, say they were to change?
CDL regulations can change rather quickly. Our handbook may not catch it, and then you'd have a conflict where, I mean, in my job with my CDL license, it's my responsibility to stay up to date. You know, if I want my job or not. So I don't want to, how do I stay up to date to two regulations if the one doesn't match the other? So I'm just looking at, are we making this redundant, which is going to make it harder on ourselves down the road?
I guess my only question there, looking at this a little closer again, is I'm not sure how much leeway or how much variation the CDL regulations allow, say for like the manner of testing. So we call out in 23.7.1F that we'll test them by breathalyzer. Does the CDL regulation specify that, or does it maybe allow for blood test or other way?
Either, I think.
So like maybe that's why that's called out, is that methodology of how
We
we're
can
going
always
to do
put
it.
a footnote. We have footnotes in various places in different chapters where it's a simple statement. Law will supersede this manual.
Yeah.
That would work.
That might just do it. Because the other thing is 23.7.2 for non-CDL positions basically says we're going to follow that as close as possible.
For the
So,
CDL
so if you don't
test.
have anything called out in the CDL,
Right.
then
When
23.7.2
they
doesn't
notify
have a
us
lot
to
to.
test them, they'll let us know drug or alcohol or both.
Okay.
So it's not always the same.
And the big difference between me and the guys here is they're driving intrastate, and I'm driving interstate. So I'm crossing state lines. Borough drivers very rarely would cross state line unless they're picking something up in Maryland or possibly Jersey. But that would be a very rare case. And technically, when they cross that line, regulations change. And we may or may not have CDL qualified drivers to cross state line. A lot of that plays into the medical card. So,
I'm a little beyond my knowledge base.
well, but I mean,
Most people probably are. So that's.
yeah. They need a CDL intrastate license to drive in Pennsylvania. Only governed by the section under PennDOT. When they cross the state line, then they're interstate, then the federal CDL regulations kick in. And we all know how good PennDOT is at writing their own stuff because they think they know about everything, and it doesn't necessarily match the federal regulations.
Okay, I guess in the section we're at, I'm not sure what. It's good to be aware of that. I'm not sure if there's any
Well,
changes.
I think Charles hit the nail on the head. Just put a footnote in there that says
Then it'll-
that, you know, law supersedes our handbook. And that way we're covered. I mean, it's only a
Okay.
problem if, it's really only a problem on that degree if they're involved in an accident, whether it's their fault or not. Anytime CDL driver's involved in an accident, it gets investigated as if he is at fault, whether he is or not. Fair or unfair, unfair in my mind, but.
Well, they can't make that determination until after all the.
Right.
Yeah.
So therefore you
You have to
automatically
collect. Yeah.
get shipped out for testing.
All right, so we'll put a footnote there under 23.7.1. And perhaps item G that, or just a footnote that law will supersede.
I'll probably put a footnote that applies to the entire chapter.
Whole chapter, yeah, that's fine. All right, that gets us our non-CDL, which is, again, largely based upon the CDL. Doesn't have to be as strict if the borough's needs supersede, but otherwise they generally do that. 23.7.3 deals with the medical review officer. Basically, you're dealing with the establishment of who can check those results and is trained to do so, which is going to be a contract circumstance for us. 23.7.4 deals with confidentiality. Any questions up through there? All right, gets us to 23.8, which gets to consequences of a policy violation. Those steps are all outlined. 23.9 deals with prevention, assistance, rehabilitation, and aftercare. Again, this is kind of our final look, so are there any questions on 23.8 or 9? These are all things you're already through. 23.10, loss of license, impaired driving charge. Any questions on that? 11 is all about record keeping. 12 deals with department head training and criminal convictions. 23.13 deals with medications. 23.14 deals with medical marijuana. All the procedures that surround that, which are extensive, but many provided for in the Medical Marijuana Act. And I believe that is the conclusion of all the language that remains in 23. So any items with Chapter 23 that we need to discuss before we finalize that? Seeing none, that takes us next to our final review. This is our last final review chapter, which is Chapter 24, which deals with discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. All right, 24.1 is your statement of policy. Right, you can see we've updated a lot of the language there to reflect our own human relations ordinance. Get your definition of sexual harassment, retaliation prohibited. It's 24.2, which gives some examples of that. Point 3 deals with penalties for misconduct. 24.4 deals with all the procedures. Are there any questions or comments? Need to make changes here with Chapter 24? It's our final look.
Yeah, in 24.4.1, I had suggested in that second line, it says the policy, violations of this policy will be accepted in writing or orally. I think we should specify through the Office of the Human Resources Coordinator.
I think I'm trying to remember if there's another spot here, but I think they need to be able to make that report also to their supervisor.
Reports with the borough manager.
Yeah, in any scenario, I think that needs to be
Okay.
a complaint that can be filed a number of different ways.
Okay.
But you may want to call that out there. That would be fine to do.
Well, I guess it does go on to say at the end of that paragraph, the report may be made. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
okay. Ignore me.
No, it's important that people know where to go.
24.2.1.
Yep.
E, discrimination. Every word from our non-discrimination ordinance needs to be included in that. I see sexual orientation and gender identity, but I don't see gender expression.
Where are you at?
E of 24.2.1. Discrimination.
Yeah, like the bottom of page 3.
4.
I think.
Oh, maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, no, it is 3, sorry.
So either a lot of the language, it looks like that section didn't quite get updated the way that some of the others did. Right, a lot of language from probably the word race onward. We just need to look at one of the other places where that appears and make sure that it mirrors it, because
Yeah, so letter E, 1 and 2. Since it's specifically discrimination, we really need to kind of make sure we're mirroring as best we can. I get that
most of it's there, but it's
most
not
of it's
all
there. I get that a lot of this is probably from Commonwealth PA law, but we have the luxury of being Borough of Commonwealth PA law. We can create our own non-discrimination ordinances, and we did.
It doesn't include veteran status either, I don't think. It should just be the same language.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't have. And that would be in both E1 and 2, that the same.
Correct.
So it doesn't have to be done immediately, I guess, but that would need to be changed to the same language as basically the top, like the first little 24.1 has that list, which does a little better job of phrasing it too. Right, are there any other questions or items in chapter 24? I'm going to make an edit there under 24.3. It's just a grammatical. It should be personnel, not personal file. Right, any other items under chapter 24? All right, that'll take us to chapter 25. This should be our first look at chapter 25, I believe. Resigning in good standing. And this is relatively short. Essentially, that if you want to resign in good standing, you need to do so 14 calendar days prior to the date of separation. And I did note the addition that we will have an exit interview, which I think is very wise.
Yep.
Okay. Has to immediately go to the manager and the HR coordinator because, yeah, it's kind of important to make sure you can do that.
Do we need to make the distinction here on the difference between resigning and retiring, and areas where that retirement is covered by, or aspects of retirement are covered by a CB collective bargaining agreement?
I guess
We could just say it, resigning/retiring.
Is there
in good
anything
standing.
currently in? I mean, I know that we have some things in the CBA related to retirement, but let's say like a management, let's say a non-labor represented employee. Let's not say what's polite, but is there an expectation currently articulated that, hey, you'll let us know? I don't know that there is. It's probably.
It's always been like 2 weeks.
Okay.
I'd recommend that people would let us know.
But it's more
2
like
weeks.
people are just, most people probably let you know for retirement months and months ahead.
Yes.
Okay. But yeah, let's just make that resignation and retirement. We're talking about separation of employment either way. All right, any other items with Chapter 25? All right, Chapter 26, Personnel Records. This is a very important chapter for a whole bunch of reasons. Specifically in 26.1, I think it's just really important. It's called out the custody of the records being in human resources, the contents of those personnel files, and the separation or segregation of those medical records into a separate file is very critical, and that's something that's often, not necessarily saying here at the borough, but in employment practices, those can be not separated, and that causes issues. So 26.1 deals with that policy, the contents, access, which is limited basically on a need to know. You have to have a legal reason to be accessing that. Essentially your management personnel doing that for employment related reasons. 26.1.4 deals with employees and their right to review. So there is some new language in here that articulates when that would occur. This is during business hours. This is during the employee's time, not during the borough's time. I was curious what people thought about, there's a piece of language in there, except for reasonable cause, that it would be limited to 1 per calendar year. I didn't know if anyone had opinions about that or not.
I don't know that I would limit it. We've had discussions with employees who have been concerned that they don't know the contents of their employee files, and that might change quickly throughout the year, and they're not notified about that. So I would think that any time an employee needs to see their employee file, they would have access to that.
I'm gonna strike that.
That's kind of how I feel too. Like if something happened at work and I felt overly nervous, I'd want to look, and if I happened to look 300 days before that,
Yeah.
or it's November and I looked at January, however you want to look at it, I want that to stop me from being able to see it. And I think the same of our people here.
Right. Well, I think a more apt, a more likely scenario is you got your one annual chance to see your file, and then over the course of a couple of months, you and your supervisor have had a falling out, and you're concerned that there might be, growing documentation in your file about and you have a right to know that. If your supervisor hasn't addressed that with you, you may have a concern, and
That's pretty much what I'm talking about.
Waiting 10 months might not be viable.
Yeah, it might not be appropriate, and it's they should just have the right to see it.
Yeah,
you should be able to see.
We get so few requests.
Right.
I think it's going to be something that's very infrequent, but if someone does, feel that they need to, I think they should be able to. Because we also have the provision in there, right? This has to be something that is requested in writing. You're not just walking up to the office and saying, I want to see my file. There's a procedure to request it in writing. There's a schedule, or hey, you're going to come in during work hour or during business hours. I think that, and of course you have your exemption, right? There are items that are not included in the inspection, right? Anytime there's a letter of reference, documentation for any type of civil or criminal matter.
Right.
Right, all these things are excluded, which makes sense to me. And then nothing can be removed, right? That also makes a lot of sense.
There's some formatting there that needs to be done in 26.1.
Sure. Oh, that's because there's a comment. Well, I don't know. The one whole section there right above 26.1.4.1 is highlighted, and there's a comment about the, yeah, if that written form doesn't exist, that form should be created.
This was a whole new section, so.
Yeah, so, but no, like, I think that's probably legacy language, but
I mean, I could have it,
if we don't have a formal file, just make sure you make one. So that if it happens, you have one to hand somebody, that's all. That's simple. Doesn't have to be overly complex, just has to cover those items. Any questions or comments there? And Chapter 26. All right, that'll take us then to first look at Chapter 27, which is confidentiality. It's pretty short. Gets straight to the point. Employees deal with confidential records or information, and they are not to disclose that information or disseminate it.
Yep.
It kind of goes into all the things, all the ways you could do that.
Okay.
Any questions on 27, confidentiality? All right. Chapter 28, electronic communications. All right, 28.1 deals with cell phones and phones in general. Some of this language, I just leave it, but it's almost like legacy language. I don't know that. I guess you still get long distance charges theoretically, but I'm assuming that the phone system
Not on VoIP phones.
doesn't allow you to just go through that. Do we have VoIP here, or?
We do.
Okay. Because like I remember systems where like if you didn't, it wasn't normal when you had that issue to, you see somebody had to have a code or something, you didn't just.
I was just thinking, I don't recall seeing a long distance charge.
No, I can't.
I don't know that it's.
I figured as long as we have landlines, it's always better to be safe.
I know they still
than sorry.
exist.
Yeah, but we do have voice
Because
over
we're somewhere
IP.
recently where it's like, it's amazing what constitutes long distance.
Right.
You know, like 10, 15 miles away was long distance.
Yeah.
But yeah, I understand, but it's just probably better off leaving it. So it deals with the use of those. It kind of handles the matter that we all know that there might be a circumstance where you need to answer a personal cell phone call, but that's not something that should be a regular issue. Right?
Section's fine.
Use is prohibited, 28.1.1. That is confidential information, illegal downloading, all those types of things. Use while operating a vehicle. Any items under 28.1? All right, 28.2 deals entirely with computer usage, which basically comes down to you're using a public terminal, whatever it is, whether it's a device, smart device, laptop, desktop. You have no expectation of privacy, and whatever you're doing better be the borough's business. Basically what it comes down to. 28.3 deals with the legal standards. Basically anything that would mess with the borough's mission or obstruct it or cause a problem. Something not to be done. 20.4 endorsements. Use of it does not imply endorsement of the content. What do you know? Things you find on the internet might not be true. It's covered in 28.4.
Read in the paper.
Which I'm told you can get on the internet these days.
Sort of.
Sort of. But no, even the borough's computer system, I think that's fair. Like you have, I mean, it's possible that you could have records that are in error. I mean, you have a lot of records. So 20.5 termination, right? When you're done, everything gets turned in. That includes all the electronic files and data. 28.6 deals with licensing. We pay for licenses. We use the licenses here. Questions about Chapter 28, Electronic Communications? Exciting stuff. All right. Chapter 29, Social Media. Is this a new chapter, perhaps?
It's an expansion on a previous chapter.
Just thinking about
the last time the manual was written was social media was just becoming
That's
a
what I was
thing
thinking
in
about,
the
the
early
time
2000s.
frame of when that was
yeah.
written. Yeah.
So this is significantly expanded, and the argument could be made that chapter 29, 30, and 31 are actually should be all combined into one chapter. But
I was going to speak to that note.
Yeah.
I don't know that we should combine 29 with 31. 29, I think a lot of what we're looking at here with social media is inclusive more of things that are done not just on the borough's time.
Right.
Whereas Chapter 31 is more of like an internet use protocol for the borough's systems. Is how I see that a little bit.
Well, so I think something that's missing here is something that we've experienced here in the last couple of years, which is employees running a Facebook profile site, which was essentially unmonitored, unregulated. It was allowing comments which we legally cannot delete, and it became sort of what's the word? Racist nightmare. And so I think we have to have some very specific language in here about employees not allowing that sort of forum to exist with the borough's name associated with it. I think that prohibition has to be in writing here.
Right, so somewhere in the middle of that paragraph of 29.2.
So is that covered in 29.1.1 social media limitations?
I don't think it is. I mean, it doesn't. This section doesn't speak to the limitations that we ended up having to put on that particular page, right? They can't run a page where the public can run amok. I think we would have wording in here that says something to the effect of appropriate restrictions must be placed on any group or page with the borough's name associated with it that disallows public comment. I don't know the exact wording here.
It makes it, I understand where Mr. Moon's at. It makes it hard because if someone wrote something, even something inappropriate, right, in the comments section, we know this, that as a borough, because there was even a move to like, there are firms that'll log all of your social media for you. This is like an extra added cost for right to know purposes. But like you don't really have the ability to, from a right to know standpoint, you have to somehow preserve that information.
Correct.
We can't delete it.
So deleting it's problematic. So the only real way to deal with that then is having it not exist to begin with.
And further, we don't necessarily want any one of our employees to spend their time on the clock administering comments and going through and deciding which ones should be deleted or not. Like the easiest solution here is don't have a Facebook page or whatever platform we're talking about here. This specific incident involved hundreds of extraordinarily violent racist statements on a Gettysburg branded Facebook page, and there was nothing we can do about it legally once those things exist. And we talked about this extensively at the time. Unfortunately, this was during lockdown, so this was all over Zoom. We talked about this. The easiest solution is to disallow these pages entirely. But if that's not going to be the case, they have to have very strict administrative rules in place. We need to have that spelled out here.
It happens, unfortunately, no matter what is originally posted. My wife and I were talking about this the other day, in the car. We're talking about a scenario where you had someone write something that's pretty, I don't know, just not inflammatory in any way, asked a question about the community, and someone took it way off into right field really quickly, and that's just a private individual. We're a public entity. The other item that I kind of noticed here that seems to be missing is that it talks about who may or may not be designated as a Facebook administrator or team member or whatnot, but I think that whoever is responsible for those social media accounts, that needs to be known by the manager, by the council, by the mayor. We need to know who those people are, because that was even an issue at one point. Who exactly has the access to modify these accounts? Because it is unfortunate, but like the easiest solution is they just don't exist. The problem is that there is kind of like a public expectation, and there are many circumstances where I think our use of social media does enhance our communication with the public. It just creates a difficulty that is hard to manage with an operation of our size and the expectations that fall upon a public entity, which are different than those that fall upon a private entity.
We do use the borough's Facebook pages to disseminate immediate information, so like when snow
No, I
emergencies
think
like
there's
that.
value. It's just, I can see where
So
Mr. Moon's coming from.
I'd hate to see the council move in the direction of eliminating the Facebook pages, but.
No, not at all. Not at all.
No, but it's more like you hate to also say that, like, oh, we don't want any comments on them, because it feels like you're
Right.
you're really snuffling
you can't-
public participation, but it's
Right.
just not really the appropriate venue, because you have people that'll go on there and
You
just
do
go
have,
on.
so you do have the ability to hide negative comments such as that. You cannot delete them. They have to be archived, but you can hide them because they still exist if someone were to put in a right to know request for them, for example.
Do you have the right to just turn them off?
Yeah, I think we would disallow.
Because the other issue is like how much time is like I don't want someone in the borough staff to be sitting up on a Saturday night.
Right.
Oh shoot! Right, these neo-Nazis just wrote some crap.
Right.
Like, I mean, it's not happened a lot recently with like the Klan, but like I remember when they used to come here, it was like a regular thing. I don't want that type of thing to exist in a digital format. I understand that we have to allow for everybody's rights and whatnot, but as a tool that we really are using to disseminate information.
I think that's a legal question. If
Yeah,
we're
I
even
think
allowed
most
to
of
turn
these-
off comments, let's ask
I
Gretchen
think
that.
most of these we would have to ask Gretchen because I don't know how much.
If you just have no comments, then you're not discriminating about whatever comments. You're not making a judgment, right?
Well, I believe
they
this-
just don't exist.
The settings that we had instituted on the existing page in question, people can comment, but the public can't see those comments. Only the administrator of the page can see the comments.
That might work.
Again, I'd want some legal advice on that.
I'm not sure you can do that with Facebook pages. You can do that with Facebook groups. You can turn off
Right.
commenting.
Yeah, see, I'm not even sure. Like, I'm not
So
up enough on.
It was done to an existing page. The media consultant came in and did the work for the department in question.
Certain comments, not everything in general.
Everything in general is not visible to the public. A couple things get through, like if you make a comment that's just emojis, that seems to get through, but anything with written comments, the administrator of the page can see it, but the public can't.
Well, I mean, I'm of the opinion, I agree, I think that the pages are important for public, for transparency reasons, for getting communication to the borough out immediately.
Sure.
I question some of the things that I see posted on our pages right now, but if that's what we want the employees to spend their time doing. But I don't think we have anybody employee in any department that's a PR marketing professional. And therefore,
You got that right.
let's have them be doing their jobs that they got paid for and not be worrying about Facebook. That's my opinion.
Well, I see
So
a
yes,
lot.
we
Yeah.
should definitely be very careful about what's posted, but we should also be monitoring it because people will comment and there's going to be things that will come up.
Yeah, I see a lot of things posted on public sites, not necessarily ours, where I'm like, where's the applicability here?
Right.
So, when something happens in the borough, when we had the drought conditions, right? That makes sense to me. But just because it's April, being a borough, the way that we're built, it doesn't necessarily make sense for us to be sharing Smokey the Bear information. From forestry, like sharing that on our Facebook page, like in a general springtime. Yeah, that's fire season, but it's not.
When was that done?
We're an urbanized setting.
On the police page.
I'm not saying anyone did that. I'm
Oh,
just
I'm
saying
like, I don't
I see
recall
this
that. I'm
done
like,
by
when did
other
that
public
happen?
entities where they're like, hey,
So
we
no, I
shared,
didn't post
if
that
you
one.
live in Peach Bottom and you want to share like some nuclear disaster awareness stuff, that makes a little more sense to me. If you live in Emporium, that doesn't make any sense. But I see people do that kind of thing all the time. So I'd agree that it's not necessarily, it's inappropriate, but it's like, I don't know why we're doing this. And it's a use of time, and that's really what it comes down to. It's the use of time.
It's use of time, and I always want to point, as a manager, I would always point back to the job description of that employee. And, and when you post something on a borough social media outlet, whatever department it is, you are speaking for the borough.
That's right.
Absolutely.
And that's why it should be a PR marketing professional, period.
And it's just hard in like
And
our.
we can't afford that. We don't
Say
have
it's
that.
hard in our size.
We
Like
don't
I
have
know
that
I have a
So
friend.
we
who-
should,
yeah.
I would caution that, I agree, I like the pay, for public perception, for public, I'm not saying get rid of them, the pages. I'm just saying I think it should be limited to, I can count them on 2 fingers, the people that have access to post on those pages, period, because they're speaking for the borough. Anything they post. And it's perception, and what are we doing with our time? We're posting all these things, and it's like, what does that have, what relevance is that to the Borough of Gettysburg?
But sometimes, it is really timely, right? Like
Absolutely.
it's faster than the other methods. So like we have snow emergencies. If we have an identified actor, right, they have a surveillance picture of somebody that committed a crime, right? It's really useful.
Well,
But-
it is and it's not, right? So, for example, I remember one post that Charles and Jill put up when they did the banner hanging at the Brown House. I didn't see that post until 4 days later. Like, it just didn't show up in my feed. So is it really disseminating timely information? I don't know.
Oh,
None of us really know if it is.
Well, that could be the algorithm of the Facebook page,
Right.
but
whoever Zuckerberg. Let's
So I
just
mean,
say.
I wouldn't depend on Facebook for everybody get to your bomb shelters,
Oh,
right?
no.
Like, that's
No,
not,
I don't.
That's not helpful.
I think the best method is we have like the email blasts and so forth. But the reality is that we don't get to decide how people consume information.
Right.
At the same time, I don't think we should get in the business though of I've known people that try to hit like every single application. I definitely don't think we should be doing that either.
No.
You do not need Instagram.
I have known people that have literally tried to keep up with whatever the new trend is, and the problem is none of them really go away, and it just becomes more and more work that someone's expending. And yeah, I have a friend who works he used to work for a sheriff's office, now he works for a school system, where yeah, it's a county operation in a very dense urban area, and sure, you can employ a PIO or two. But that's not going to happen here in Gettysburg. We're not going to do it. So we'll have Gretchen take a little bit of a look. It sounds like give some information, but the general theme is that if comments can be turned off, that's kind of sounds like where we need to be from a maintenance standpoint. And we need to know who is posting and kind of keep it. Well, that's within the supervisor's purview to keep it like, hey, applicable and
Right.
on task.
yeah, I feel like it really needs to be reined in for the simple fact of, it really needs to be reined in, meaning how many people have access to post on said borough official pages. And any department of the borough is borough official. And You're
Oh, yeah.
speaking for the borough. So I think we need to rein that in on who has admin access to those. Because frankly, none of them are being paid to do that. And therefore, they shouldn't be doing it.
If nothing else, it just needs to be known.
They need to be paid, they need to be doing their job that they're being paid to do.
I don't want to have a question about, who is doing that. I
Right.
mean, I know at work, like, I know who's doing it. It's my principal. Like, that's one of the things that she has undertaken
Sure.
from a public
Yeah,
relations
and-
standpoint, because we don't have a lot of people either. And she made a decision like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And I understand why.
Sure.
But it also makes it real simple in terms of who's doing what,
Right.
because it's pretty clear who it is.
And it just boils down to accountability. If something were to happen, well,
Yeah.
we're posted it.
Yeah, no, and that happens. That happens. All right, that would take us to Chapter 30, Email Electronic Communication. Again, here there was a note about combination. I think you could combine this with 28 because they're both borough system chapters.
Yeah, I think.
Essentially.
Yeah, electronic communications, social media, email, internet usage. I mean, it's sort of a general IT policy.
Like this, you're looking at, it's all usage of borough facilities. It's a lot of the same type of discussion, right? The computer, what you're doing on the computer is not private. Your email, which is something you're doing on the computer, is not private. You don't solicit. You don't harass.
Do we, under 30.2, email is not private, do we want to put in language there that as a public employee, all of our email records are also discoverable?
Right
and,
to know applicable. I'll put a note to that.
That is definitely the intent of pointing out that they're not private.
Yeah, you might just put that in there because
It's true.
it's completely accurate, and when we have right to know requests, sometimes it's just interesting, like how much you end up gathering records that the person isn't looking for. But every time when someone hits reply, there's a record. It's just the way it is. Especially if it's the reply, there's really nothing to it. It's like, I received your email. Thanks. Another record. That's pretty much how it works.
Yeah.
And no one is really looking for that, but it becomes part of it. Email monitoring, that's kind of a given. This is a public institution, public entity. Does the list for everyone with solicitation and harassment, anybody have any notes there that we really needed to change anything there? Yeah, 30.6, I had a note on that too. So email deletion and preservation. So the note, what I had written was, the only thing you should really be deleting is spam, but that's difficult to define. And now that email is all cloud-based, right, there was a day when this was on a server somewhere,
Right.
and we may be assessed fees based upon the amount we're storing, but at the same time, these are all right-to-know records, and I'm trying to remember, it's been many years since I had to take the federal, I worked for MPS, you had to take that training every year, and basically it's a record until forever, and don't delete anything. And they had specific steps to take that were, at one time you could tell were kind of antiquated because of the nature of, must be in the beginning of email where you're like going to print things out. We're not going to do that.
Sarah, do you know if there's anything in the...
Literally what it described when I started there.
Electronic, you can-
Described printing them out and like filing them, and I was like, oh no.
Theater sometimes.
Email is 15 years old.
I don't remember which chapter was in, but I noticed and I just skipped past where it talked about jazz drives and zip drives, and I was like, yeah, I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah.
Remember when 100 megabytes was a lot of storage? There was a day.
Passwords.
So 30.6, it looks like we're going to have to ship that to the solicitor.
Yeah. I was just asking
Because of
Sarah
right to know.
here if there's anything referencing email retentions in the retention law, the record retention law.
I mean, I'd be shocked if these weren't all records under the legal definition.
Right, they
And
are,
then the
they are
question
records,
is-
even every time we get a solicitation and a spam mail.
Then the question is,
that's-
if you wanted to,
Right.
could you after so many years? But then the follow-up question is, even if you could, are you really going to go, say after 7 or 10 years, let me go to my emails from 2013.
Right.
Spend time deleting them. It's like you're wasting time. You know, it's just not a good use. I think that whatever fee we end up paying to some cloud server is justified as opposed to paying an employee to sit there deleting
Yeah.
old emails. It
Yeah,
just
but cheaper
seems,
in the long run.
yeah, it just doesn't seem like a good use of time.
They are, but the question is, do we need to, does Tracy even need to really keep them after X time? I don't know.
So we'll have Gretchen kind of kick the tires on that.
Yeah.
Great.
Is that more like Gretchen or like Harry?
Oh, yeah, that might be a hairy question.
It's probably a hairy
Yeah,
question first.
yeah.
See what they have to say.
Smart.
Not that smart. The word solicitor was in the note. It's a different word for lawyer.
I think I know what he's gonna say.
A specific one. And passwords, any 30.7 basically deals with keeping your password private.
Password use must. What does that mean, that first sentence? Password use must have department supervisor approval.
So I think this envisions like older systems where passwords were somehow optional
Yeah.
in certain things. And it's like you're not going to add it unless it's needed. I don't know. We may still have systems that exist like that, but it seems unlikely.
And then it goes on, employees will notify the department supervisors of their need to use password. Like, what is that?
Yeah, this is very antiquated language.
So it seems like we
It's
could.
old language before you were using email.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking of like.
You could probably just delete everything up until the
Looks like
employees
it-
must
So
provide.
yeah,
passwords
it
for
goes
the
on to get
person.
weirder. So like, let's just strike that and
It looks like it was written before half the world was born.
Yeah.
passwords may only be used after all other possible methods of protecting information have been exhausted.
Yeah, we can strike basically everything up until employees must provide. Yeah, right where you are, Kara. Everything before that should probably just go.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm thinking of like where we got like the Apple LLGS out. We're putting in the 5-inch and drive and starting it up.
Employees must
That's where we're
provide
at.
their passwords to the borough secretary upon request. Is that legit?
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's for continuity of operations purposes.
It is, and our IT manager,
Like, I would think that
has
someone-
all that also.
Someone needs to have it
Traceta
because
has
if
it.
you get hit by a bus.
Traceta has that.
They don't have their passwords though, because once we get them, they send that temporary. They're changed and then they come to me.
Oh,
So
that's
they
good to
don't go
know.
back, they don't go back to Traceta. So our
Could
IT
Trace to get through if they had to?
I'm sure they could probably crash.
Like,
it.
this is what I'm envisioning is, like, someone has a near fatal accident. We have to be able to get into whatever it is, the accounting software or wherever, like, we need to make sure that we have access to those things. Yeah, it's almost equivalent sometimes with like the institutional knowledge gaps where it's, if you don't know which filing cabinet to look in, this
Sure.
is the digital version of
They
that.
could crash
Because
into it.
I've gotten the screen of death where I couldn't do anything,
Mhm.
and I had to call when I got in, so
Yeah.
they can get in.
They can get in.
So maybe that's covered by our IT somehow, or our IT has to hold it. Somebody needs to hold it, though, I would agree. Because in all fairness, though, like I'm thinking about, I guess my IT at work probably knows it, but like I've never been asked to disclose it to them. And in certain scenarios, do you have to change yours every 90 days, or?
Mm-mm.
Because that can become,
Burdensome.
Yeah.
well, if you had to update it with someone every,
Yeah.
periodically, it just creates a lot of paperwork. For really no purpose if IT can just get into it. The other language there is kind of pretty standard. You don't share your password. You don't, disclose your password You don't write your password on a note card and attach it to your computer screen. It's basically what the last sentence means. Okay.
You're supposed to take those out.
Any questions on chapter 30 then?
Almost done.
I know. That's what I keep
What?
thinking. We're almost done.
Oh. We're gonna have a party.
It's not the most exciting work session, topic in my time here, but conscious that it's a very important one.
Oh, yes, 3 to go.
31 is internet usage. The World Wide Web. Some of this language I want to keep just because it's like, it's kind of fun to
Kitschy.
see someone write that out like it was 1994.
Do I capitalize that? I think I
I
capitalize it.
think some people don't even know what www stands for if you go out and ask.
Well, then
people
we're
these days, they're
we're
like,
leaving it there for that person that ends up on that, late night show or whatever.
We use a rotary phone.
But a lot of the language here is pretty standard, right? Usage for job-related activities, incidental, occasional brief personal use. It complies with borough's policy within reasonable limits or may be used while off-duty. Don't use for personal purposes. Everything that you do is an official record, right? Everything's going to be seen by the borough. You have to use antivirus protections, downloading and copying things that are hazardous, which is probably done more by error through email trolls than anything. Abuse of privileges includes prohibited uses. There's a whole list there.
I have a question on 31.3.1 prohibited internet uses.
Yep.
The second bullet point.
I see what you're saying. I see where we're at. Yep, let's copy some language into
Copy
bullet
the-
point number 2.
The non-discrimination ordinance.
Again, every word from race onward, let's make that all the same. See where you're at.
Have an interesting thing going on right now with the school board about that very thing. Isn't that interesting?
This school board?
Hmm?
The one here, right?
Mm-hmm. Of a member.
Um, yeah, it deals with private financial commercial interests, a lot of things that you would often see, right? We're not going to have anyone copying, downloading software illegally. A lot of it's basic legal stuff. Copyright laws, accessing information they're not supposed to. Using it to basically commit any crime. There's a whole bunch of things listed that basically cover that.
Yeah.
So there is quite an extensive list. I guess I would ask if there are any questions regarding that list.
Still making it through here.
So unfortunately, we've seen people damage systems and so forth at my workplace in the past. We have a very similar policy, but policy 815, I know that one by number.
Your Upper Adams, right?
Yeah. We had people that thought they were clever, they hacked the network,
Wastefully using.
which was not helpful.
I'm okay with that exhaustive list, yes.
I would debate if what they did was even hacking, but they thought they were so impressive themselves. Caused a lot of problems, productivity.
I feel like you guys might be talking about something.
All right, 31.4 is confidential, sensitive, and proprietary information. Basically just takes the same thing we talked about the computers, puts it on the internet. It's all connected. 31.5 deals with software and hardware. And a lot of that deals with not attaching ancillary devices without permission, because that doesn't always go well. That could cause harm to the system. It could cause things to not work properly. That is where I saw and just leave jazz and zip drives. It just makes me laugh.
35 millimeter magnetic tape.
Yeah. I could probably find one. It has a USB port even. So, believe it.
Almost there.
That's good.
Yeah.
Are we moving to 32?
Yeah, I was just kind of giving everybody a minute.
So
I know
just
there's
sort of
people still reading.
organizational thought. I wonder if we, instead of wanting to make this 32 at the end of all of this IT stuff, do we want to put this back closer to the sections that have to do with benefits in terms of employment and that sort of stuff? So this might be more like
Organizationally,
12
probably
instead of
true.
32.
Yeah. Does anybody have any other items for chapter 31?
Nope.
Okay, so 32 deals with evaluation and promotion. Descriptions of positions is 32.1. Performance evaluations 32.2. I did make a note there, and I had noted it as 30.2.2.1. Okay, after it says they're prepared by the supervisor at least annually, and the question I had was, should we include a reference to a certain number of days within the employee's employment anniversary? That's become practice. Should we codify in policy here that the expectation is that an evaluation will be done basically upon the employee's anniversary, so that we don't have a supervisor clustering
Generally
them?
been doing it in the month of their anniversary. Yeah.
Okay, yes,
Within
but some
30
sort of
days.
language within 30 days or 60 days of that anniversary might be a good addition there. So we don't have someone put themselves behind the 8 ball, or let's say you had a supervisor that retired mid-year.
Right.
And they just said, oh, I'm gonna let those go for the new person. That's really not appropriate. So it might just be good to have that language
That's an
there.
insane hypothetical.
I have seen people that just wait to do them all within 1 month.
Yeah.
It depends what kind of calendar you operate on. If you operate on the January to December, people try to do all these evaluations in December. Well, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
December is usually kind of a messed up month to begin with. Um, 32.2.1 there was basis of evaluation. And 32.3 you have promotions.
All good.
All right. Any questions about 32? All right, and that takes us to chapter 33, safety. The only thing I would say about 33 that I wasn't sure about, and I kind of thought maybe we should just leave it as is, some of these things, but I know a lot of this is now called out in the collective bargaining agreement.
Yes.
So maybe just a footnote that the collective bargaining agreement supersedes all this, but I don't know. I had mixed feelings about whether we should
Nothing would that would not
delete any of this or
won't
not.
hurt to do that.
But I know that we codified a lot of the safety equipment into the CBA because it seemed necessary that it become part of the CBA. But 33.1 is your hard hat policy. 33.2 are seat belts. Which kind of reminds me again, I worked for the feds and I had to sign a thing every year that said I wore my seatbelt when I never drove a vehicle for them. Safety equipment.
Yeah, in this section, do we want to, I might be just spitballing here. I mean, there was a period of time because of the pandemic where we had to require sanitation of vehicles in between uses. Do we want to put some sort of provision in there that that might occur, you know, in a similar public health emergency, or do we want to just let that go and
Well, would that
assume
not be
people?
covered by our policy that kind of pretty much states that we'll follow the CDC guidelines for anything?
Yeah, you kind of a standalone for that.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a
Right.
standalone chapter on that,
Yeah.
that's right.
I mean, I don't know, did the CDC guidelines say, you know, clean your truck between uses? Like,
mean,
but,
they-
but that's,
they-
what- but that's what
they did
DPW
go
was
into,
doing,
like,
right?
sanitation
It did,
and
that did
everything.
go into sanitation, yeah.
Okay,
It did.
Question.
okay,
Because
great.
that required businesses to start sanitizing and like hotels and everything, like to
Mhm.
sanitize after people came in and
Sure.
did all that.
Okay, thank you.
I think 33.3 is the one where it's really, that's where, if I remember correctly, like the CBA, there's basically a chart now. If you're doing this, you must do that.
Hmm.
This language is a little more, it
That was-
calls
that
out
re-
specific items, but it doesn't have that reference, and it seems like the CBA just kind of prevails.
Right, yeah, what you're referencing is there's now a matrix in the CBA where there's PPE that's required based
Yeah.
on the specific job
If
you're
you're
doing
trimming a
that
tree, you
day.
shall have this on.
Correct.
Right.
You know, so I mean, I don't know that it needs to come out of here, but that's where it's gonna go. That's where you're gonna actually look.
Right.
It should say here, in any case, at some point here, it should say you need to look at your CBA. Because if this is for an employee and they're trying to figure out what they're supposed to do, not everybody reads their contract. Oh, I know that one very well.
Until they need something.
Some people, I've worked with people that go their entire careers and don't need much anything, and then they, really? Yeah, really. 33.4 is highway and equipment safety. $33.5 deals with operation of motor vehicles. Publication 111. Any questions or items in chapter 33? All right, so that concludes the first read through of all the chapters. The last item we have on this topic is the cover page, which includes a mission statement, vision statement, and list of core values. And I provided some input to Charles earlier, specifically the language in the last sentence of the mission statement, kind of grammatically and in terms of how things work. I asked him I provided some language to rephrase that to kind of better reflect how our system functions, system of government functions. So reference the Constitution of both the United States, the Commonwealth, and the principles of a representative democracy that we operate in.
So maybe it's covered just by putting in the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but since we do govern by the Commonwealth PA Borough Code, should that be listed in there, or is that covered by Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
That's
Same
all
thing.
inclusive. Yeah. So it's kind of like when you reference the Constitution of the United States, like you're actually referencing basically everything.
Code of law.
You know, everything that's codified is considered to be part of that. That's the document that allows all that to be created. It's just the base document, but yeah, it all connects. Point well taken. I don't know, in general, I don't get too excited about mission and vision statements. I probably should.
I mean, you could strike the vision statement.
No, it's fine. The values seem to be pretty good. I don't know about fun, but if you must.
I'd be curious to hear Ms. Lawson's thoughts.
Patty?
I
She's on mute.
Fell asleep.
I don't.
Or we lost her.
You might have lost her.
I was surprised she hadn't spoken up before now. Which
Just
made me
asked her
wonder
if she's still there.
Made me wonder if she was connected still, because she often
She has spotty
usually has
reception
something
there.
to say
Yeah.
here or there.
Military family. You're a military family. They have
I mean, the
all
values
sorts
can be hard to choose, but I think a lot of the ones that we
standard
chose
operating
were
procedures.
the good ones.
Can't see it from here.
I don't know.
Anyway, I mean, we don't
A
have
lot
to.
of them were the important ones. I think
Oh,
you'd hit.
she says she's there, just waiting.
Hello?
Patty.
Oh, she's waiting for me to call her.
Oh.
Please hold.
Okay. But yeah, trust, effectiveness,
She was on earlier.
responsiveness, respect,
She said,
inclusion.
I'm on mute.
Yeah,
Was that after the public hearing?
you did call and she
Yeah.
went on mute.
And she says, I'm gonna be on mute this time.
Transparency. Yeah, she did. No, you did. You did what you're supposed to do. Transparency, integrity, innovation. No, I really think it covers.
I don't necessarily want the staff to have fun.
That's a joke I usually have with the students. This is
There's no fun.
school
Rehearsal room.
fun. Usually I get a good chuckle after that.
Reading is fundamental.
I hope not.
There's the fun.
Fundamental.
That's it.
I'm gonna use that one this
Yeah.
year.
That's
It
the
just,
only fun
it just
you
dropped.
can
I did call her and she said she was gonna mute herself.
It just dropped.
Yeah, it just dropped. I think.
Huh.
I don't know. I actually don't know that. I'm just looking at it.
We can revisit
Maybe this
this
is bad spot.
page. This doesn't
Yeah, I
have
know
to be-
I do know that she cares deeply about mission and vision
She
statements,
does.
much more than I ever would.
Right, and we don't have to sort that tonight. So
Yeah.
we can circle back to
So
this.
I think we can, facilitate her input into that.
Patty Lawson.
Hello. We are at the mission statement and vision statement, core values segment.
Mm-hmm.
And we were hoping to get your input.
Okay. I don't have the document with me, but I did send something about that earlier.
Okay.
Okay, I remember that. Let me.
That was quite a while ago, so
Yeah,
I don't know.
I know. Let me see if I can.
While they're looking,
Yeah.
Patty, would you like me to read what we have?
Sure. Is this the mission statement that you're reading now?
This
Yes.
is the document entitled cover page in the folder for tonight.
Okay.
Do you have that in there?
I've had internet problems all night.
Got it.
so-
I can read for you what she had provided before, which is, I think, pretty good. The Borough of Gettysburg will strive to efficiently protect the health, safety, and welfare of the residents and visitors of the most famous small town in the world. No, that's what I wrote. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm reading an email here. She wrote, "The staff and elected officials of the Borough of Gettysburg strive to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of residents and visitors while pursuing a sustainable community that attracts a diverse and thriving residential, business, and tourist community to our historical yet modern small town."
Oh, that's very good.
The only thing I kind of object to is the use of the word community twice.
You object to the use of what? I didn't
The
hear
word
that.
community twice in the same sentence, I tried not to.
Okay.
That's really just a stylistic thing on mine.
Sure. Yep.
I forgot, yeah, I wanted to throw a nod to Troxel, the most famous small town in the
I
world.
think that's nice. I also agree, like, short and concise mission statements work best, even for
Yeah.
grant,
I agree.
especially for grant writing. Just short and concise mission statements.
Yep. Great.
Yeah, I think we really capture,
That's not what's here.
no, but we capture most of that. I'm looking here, health. So the core they always talk about with a borough is the health, safety, and welfare. Those words probably should be in there. And I think it also touches on sustainable and diverse that the current
Completely different than what's there.
draft does not touch on. The current draft does handle residents and visitors. So it doesn't specifically call out business and tourist community.
Or best known small town.
No.
So, yeah.
So you're proposing to change the mission statement to that one? That's currently in here.
Probably more of a combination of the two. That
Yeah, I kind of like
second
those.
sentence should probably hang there where it's at, but that first sentence.
Yeah, so
maybe.
Patty, the draft that we're looking at has a sentence that I kind of like, and please share your feelings on adding this to the end of what you've drafted.
Sure.
Charles
What does
has-
it say?
Charles has, actions taken in the pursuit of our mission will be in accordance with the Constitution of the United States of America, the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and the principles of representative democracy.
Well, I like that too.
Yeah.
As long as it's not too long. Do you think it's too long?
I think that 2 sentences is like, it's just going to have to be acceptable at some point. I don't think this is worth trying to hammer it into one.
What did John say?
John didn't say anything.
Wes was just saying, I'm not sure that it's worth trying to hammer it into one sentence. It seems like it would be, overly burdensome to attempt to do so. Probably take the sentence that you have and then add that second, sub that for our first sentence current and add the second sentence and we're probably good.
Can you send me Patty's?
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll just forward this to you. And, yeah. Okay. So you have that.
Cool.
Okay.
Where's the champagne?
So, anything anybody wants to revisit right now?
All of it.
So, to Member Moon's,
Just
all of
no.
it, we are at a point where I think your next draft will be one omnibus package of policies.
And
It'll
some things will be reordered to reflect.
Things will be reordered, restructured, renumbered, but
Formatted a
the
little bit.
content will be as you've decided.
Okay.
Perhaps the best way to move forward with that giant document would be for every member to fully review it before the next workshop. So we are coming with just, hey, here's my bullet points, so that it's, let's talk about this, this, and this, not the entire thing.
Yeah, no. Come with a list if there is a
Do
list.
you want to even, yes, we could do that. Or we could do it like, since we have gone through it,
Yep.
each chapter, we could do it like a grant panel review board, which is you're responsible for X chapter, you're responsible for X chapter, you're responsible for X chapter, X chapter.
I kind of want everybody to look at the whole
To
thing.
Look at the whole thing.
If you would like to
Again.
start mid through to make sure that you get to that's fine, but I'm looking at, hey, I'm not even going to say chapter 1, does anybody have anything? I'm going to say, all right,
Who has something?
chapters 1 through 10, is there anything?
Got it. Okay.
We'll try to get it in order. If there are items, we'll try to go in order then. But yeah, we're not going to sit here and do this all again.
And to reiterate points we've made at previous meetings, I know this has been laborious for everybody involved, especially for the staff, but it's important. It's important that we review this periodically and make sure our policies are up to date. It is in the best interest of the taxpayer that we are the most responsible employer possible.
And we should remember that 25 to 33, in all fairness, was just the first look tonight. So we'd be more likely, if there are items that need revisited, it's more likely you'll see those in those areas, because you will see some new language, particularly things that we're kicking to attorneys.
You think you're gonna have this back in a month?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
You answered a little too quickly.
We're gonna get information from Gretchen and everything too, that's.
Gretchen's been really responsive the whole way through. You've been
Okay.
throwing
Okay,
stuff at her
so the plan
whole
will be
time.
August, and if something doesn't work out, we can always
Right.
hit specific items again in September, if absolutely needed. But that way, it's all tidied up before the end of the year.
I'd like to get it done before budget season starts.
I know that. I'm well aware of how that works. But that way there's no chance that we're gonna have this extend into another year. Right.
I don't see why it wouldn't take.
You know, well, and the big issue, right, you have an election, you're gonna have new people, new faces, you don't wanna start over again.
Right, get it done.
Be done. All right. Any other new business? Anyone on the council, staff? All right, that takes us to public comment. This is our second public comment session.
And you thought we forgot you.
Anyone like to make public?
For patience?
You do. I appreciate it. I would ask you to
You
use the
should.
podium though.
Okay.
So everyone at home can hear you because the microphone's there.
I don't know why you said this wasn't exciting, because I thought it was riveting.
Yeah.
That makes me feel so good.
Well, there you go.
Well, I came here to talk about motor coach parking.
Name
The
and
reason I had the
address.
patience to stay is...
Name and address, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm so sorry. My name is Nancy Goodmisted. I am the founder and director of the Shriver House Museum, located at 309 Baltimore Street here in Gettysburg.
Yep.
And the reason I had the patience is because I figured there's probably not a lot of opportunity to get everybody together at the same time. So that's why I wanted to wait and talk to everybody. I've been running the Shriver House Museum for 27 years. And I have tried my damnedest to make the coaches the least intrusive for my neighbors as I possibly could. And many of my neighbors have told me that they really appreciate the way I do it. We greet every bus. I give every bus driver a note that says you can stay here, but you have to turn off your motor. And we are with the group the entire time. When they're leaving, we're with the group till they get back on the coach and they drive away. If they arrive and they're on the other side of Baltimore Street, we actually run across the street and ask them to go up around the circle, come on back again, because I don't want to be intrusive to the neighbors across the street. And I understand that bus is unsightly on Baltimore Street, but I think we do a lot of buses and I'm glad to have them. I do know that I have neighbors that think the buses just do not belong on Baltimore Street. But, you know, when I first moved here, my husband Dal and I, we opened up the very first bed and breakfast here in town. It was the old Appleford Inn on Carlisle Street. And we were young and we were stupid. This house was magnificent. 10 bedrooms, 5 fireplaces. It was absolutely gorgeous. But we were so blinded by how beautiful the house was, we didn't realize we were surrounded by 3 fraternity houses. And it was 4 years of hell. But those fraternity houses are still there. They're not going to go away. So who left? We did. So I don't mean disrespect to my neighbors, but if you buy a house on the main drag in a tourist town that gets a couple million visitors a year, you have to understand what you're getting into. So I think I understand what they're saying, but I don't think, I just think you have to understand what you bought when you moved into that house. I think I have a hard time with treating Baltimore Street, where there are very, very few businesses, the same as Chambersburg Street, New York Street, and Baltimore, the shops and things that are closer to the square. I talked to Charles and Krista earlier today. I do understand that if you gave those folks permission to do something that I really wanted to do, and then you turned around and said no to me, I do understand that you're stuck in the middle of all this. One thing I would ask is, maybe you could, no disrespect to you, but you're not in the tourism industry. I am, and many other people here are in town are. Why don't you, instead of making policies, invite us all to get together, sit around the table here, and throw things out and see if together we can come up with some way to make this happen and work out a little bit better. I understand the way it's going to work, but I am concerned since I can't reserve a spot for a coach. If somebody else pulls into the spot and then I have a coach coming, if they have to stop and back into a parking space on that street, it's going to back traffic up and over the circle. And it's happened on rare occasions, but I'm trying to stop all that from happening. There were other ideas where they would drop people off and then move the bus and go park someplace else. But the issue with that, just from experience, because we tried it once, is the coach will pull up, he knows he's not going to stay, so he doesn't turn off his coach. Well, it takes us 10 minutes to get the group off the coach because we divide them into 3 tinier groups. We get them off one group at a time. So if they left there, years ago, the plan was they were going to go to Johns Avenue behind McDonald's. Well, then they're through town, putting more traffic on the streets. They're going to go to McDonald's. They know they're not going to stay there for very long, so why would they turn off the motor? Well, being the good drivers that they are, they're going to show up early for their passengers. So they start driving again, come all the way down Baltimore Street, around the circle, back up, taking up traffic that doesn't really seem necessary to me. And again, when they pull up, I know I'm not going to be here very long because I'm going to pick up those kids and move on. So why would I turn off my coach? So now you have the coaches running for an hour, 15 minutes or so, when they could just sit there and not be running at all. So I'm willing to talk, but I just wish there was a way that, I don't know, that we could work together and work this out, because I'm a little nervous about this one. I don't want to have coaches stuck in the middle of the street on Baltimore Street. So I want to be good to my neighbors, but I also am trying to do a business that I think is a very, very good business here in town. Anybody, any questions?
I'll just make a comment that I appreciate you, Nancy, as a tourist business owner that's actually making an effort with your bus groups. I applaud you for having you and your staff or volunteers or whoever is working with you, meeting the buses and with the group at all times and making sure that they get back to the bus safely. And God forbid they leave any trash or cause any disturbance, there's supervision there and you can take care of that. And being a good neighbor, I appreciate that. And I hope that all businesses learn by your example.
Well, I know neighbors that have had people knocking on their doors late at night, stealing their plants, urinating in their plants, doing all kinds of crazy things. But I can tell you, those are other companies in town that have no contact with their coaches at all. They come in, they pay, they're gone, and it's the ghost tours, and they don't supervise them in any way whatsoever, and we do. So I think we deserve a little credit for doing that. But I appreciate you. Thank you.
Okay. Is there additional public comment?
Anybody? Thank you very much.
All right. There's no additional public comment. We are adjourned.